3 weeks before Christmas, I overheard my son and his wife planning to forge my signature on a power of attorney document, drain my retirement accounts, and have me moved into a memory care facility by New Year's. I said nothing. I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and started doing math in my head. Old habits. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant. I know how to follow a money trail, and I know how to build one that leads nowhere. On December 23rd, my son called from the living room. "Dad, where are you?" Ethan and the kids just pulled in. Everyone's waiting. I told him to check the filing cabinet in my home office. Second drawer. The green folder. What he found in that folder made him sit down on the floor. I know because his wife told me later not to apologize, to threaten. My wife, Carol, passed away 14 months before any of this happened. Pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, the kind that gives you enough time to say goodbye, but not enough time to make peace with it. We were married 43 years. She was the one who kept the house warm, kept the family calendar, kept me from working through every holiday we ever had. After she was gone, the house got very quiet. My son Philip and his wife Teresa offered to move in 3 months after the funeral. Philip framed it as concern. He was worried about me being alone. He said the commute from their apartment in Columbus was wearing on them, and my house in Westerville had 4 bedrooms sitting empty. It made sense on paper. I said yes because I was still grieving and because I genuinely believed he meant well. That was mistake number 1. For about 4 months, things were fine. Philip helped with yard work. Teresa cooked a few times a week. My granddaughter Lily would come on weekends and we'd watch old movies and she'd fall asleep on the couch. That part I don't regret. I'll never regret that part. But somewhere around month 5 or 6, I started noticing things. Teresa asking if I'd forgotten things I hadn't forgotten. Mentioning conversations we'd never had, then looking at Philip when I disagreed. Small things. A glass I'd left on the counter became a pattern of leaving things around. A wrong turn I made on the way back from the hardware store became evidence of confusion. Philip started suggesting I let Teresa manage the household bills. Just to take the stress off me, he said. I have a master's degree in accounting. I managed pension fund audits for state agencies for 3 decades. I do not need help with household bills. I said nothing, but I started paying attention. I started keeping a notebook. I wrote down dates, times, what was said, who was present. Carol used to tease me about my notebooks. Said I treated every family dinner like a forensic investigation. I suppose she wasn't entirely wrong. By October, I had 6 pages of documentation. The day I found out everything was a Tuesday, November 29th. I'd had a routine appointment with my cardiologist in Dublin, and she finished early. I pulled into my driveway at 2:10 instead of 3:45. November in central Ohio, gray and cold. The kind of afternoon that smells like dead leaves and furnace heat. I came in through the back door off the garage, the one that squeaks if you don't lift the handle slightly. I'd been meaning to fix it for 2 years. I was glad I hadn't. Philip and Teresa were in my home office upstairs. The door was half open. I heard Teresa's voice first, clipped and efficient. She was the one who always drove the logistics. Dr. Harmon will sign the cognitive assessment by the 15th. I already gave him the summary we drafted. And the POA. That was Philip. His voice had that flat, careful tone I'd been hearing more and more of lately. Ready to execute. Once the assessment is in hand, the attorney says we can move on the accounts within 10 days. The house will take longer, but if we have financial POA and the memory care placement documented, the court won't question it. A pause. Papers shuffling. He still doesn't know? Philip asked. He thinks we're helping him, Teresa said. And then she actually laughed. Not cruelly, which almost made it worse. Just lightly, like they were discussing a scheduling problem that was going well. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and felt the floor shift under me. Not literally. But something structural gave way in my chest. Some load-bearing belief I'd been standing on for 59 years of being someone's father. I did not go upstairs. I went back to the kitchen. I poured the coffee I'd been about to make. I sat down at the table where Carol and I had eaten breakfast for 2 decades, and I opened my notebook to a new page. I wrote down the date, the time, every word I could remember. Then I started making a list. I spent that night in the guest room I had been using since they moved into the master, working through every financial account I had. Checking. Savings. My 403B from the state. Carol's IRA that had transferred to me. The joint brokerage account we'd built over 30 years of careful, boring investing. The house, paid off in 2019. Total assets, approximately $1.4 million. Everything they needed to retire on someone else's timeline. I am a forensic accountant. I spent my career documenting fraud. And I will tell you something true about it. Most financial crimes succeed not because they're clever, but because the victim trusts the person doing it. That trust is the vulnerability. Remove the trust, and the plan falls apart. I couldn't remove it visibly. If they knew I'd heard them, they'd accelerate. File faster. Move faster. Get Dr. Harmon's fraudulent assessment on the record before I could respond. I needed them to believe I was still the grieving, distracted old man who left glasses on the counter. So, I kept playing that role, and I went to work. At 8 the next morning, I called an estate planning attorney in Powell named Helen Marsh. I'd known her name for years through a professional contact. I did not call from my home phone. I used my cell, parked outside a Panera on Polaris Parkway. I explained the situation in clinical terms: potential elder financial abuse, fraudulent medical documentation, a forged power of attorney in preparation. She didn't miss a beat. Come in today, 2 o'clock. Helen was precise and serious, and she confirmed what I already suspected. A durable power of attorney executed under these circumstances could be challenged, but challenging it after the fact was far harder than preventing it. My window was narrow. How narrow? I asked. She pulled up the county court filings on her screen, checked something, looked at me over her glasses. If Dr. Harmon's assessment gets filed before you move, they can request emergency guardianship. At that point, you're fighting a court process, not a private document. You need to act before the 15th. That was 13 days away. I said, tell me exactly what to do and in what order, and I'll do it. Helen's first instruction was the most important one: establish independent documentation of my cognitive competence, dated and verified before any court filing could occur. She had a list of 3 neuropsychologists who conducted independent evaluations. I called all 3 that afternoon from the Panera parking lot. One had an opening Thursday. I took it. Her second instruction: restructure the financial accounts so that a power of attorney, even if executed, would land on empty containers. I spent the next 4 days doing the quietest, most careful demolition of someone's inheritance that I have ever conducted. And I have, professionally, conducted several. The brokerage account I transferred to a new account at a different institution, under a new financial advisor, with statements directed to a P.O. box I rented at a UPS store in Gahana. The savings I moved in increments small enough not to trigger automatic notification thresholds. The 403B I had redesignated with updated beneficiary paperwork, everything to a charitable trust Helen helped me establish, the Carol Ann Whitfield Memorial Fund, with distributions designated to a literacy nonprofit Carol had volunteered with for 12 years. The house I could not move quickly, but I could protect it. Helen drew up a revocable living trust. I transferred the deed. A trust cannot be seized by a power of attorney. It requires separate legal action to dissolve. All of this I did between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., while Teresa was at her office and Philip was at his. I came home each evening at my normal time. I asked Philip about his day. I complained mildly about traffic on 270. I watched the news after dinner and fell asleep in the armchair the way I always did. One evening, Teresa asked if I'd thought more about letting her take over the bill payments. I said I appreciated the offer and I was still thinking about it. She smiled. Philip smiled. They exchanged the small, quiet look that couples exchange when a plan is proceeding. I went to bed and crossed another item off my list. The neuropsychological evaluation took 4 hours on the Thursday morning. Dr. Patricia Osei administered it at her office in Worthington. Memory tests, pattern recognition, processing speed, executive function. I scored in the 94th percentile for my age cohort. Mr. Whitfield, she said at the end, setting her pen down, your cognition is completely intact. There is no clinical basis for any dementia diagnosis, and frankly, I'd be surprised if there were. I thanked her and asked for 3 certified copies of the report. I stored one in Helen's office, one in my safe deposit box at a Fifth Third branch Philip didn't know about, one I photographed and uploaded to an encrypted cloud folder that a college friend who works in IT had helped me set up that weekend. By December 12th, 3 days before Dr. Harmon's supposed assessment deadline, I had a trust protecting my house, a restructured financial portfolio with no assets accessible by a third-party POA, a certified psychiatric evaluation documenting full cognitive competence, and a legal team ready to file a complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit. All Philip and Teresa had was a fraudulent assessment from a doctor I'd never met. There was one more thing I needed to do. I built them a decoy. It's an old audit technique. When you're investigating fraud, sometimes you create a false trail, a document that looks like what the target is searching for to determine whether someone has access they shouldn't have. If the decoy moves, you know where the leak is. I typed a letter on my old desktop printer. I addressed it to Philip, made it look like a draft of a new will, dated it 2 months earlier, and placed it in a manila folder in the second drawer of my home office filing cabinet, the drawer I knew Teresa opened regularly, because I'd started cataloging when certain papers shifted position. The letter said I was planning to leave everything to Philip and Teresa, the house, the accounts, all of it, because they had been so devoted during my grief. I was grateful. I wanted them taken care of. I sealed the folder with a small piece of tape, positioned at an angle only I would notice. Within 4 days, the tape had been disturbed. That same week, I heard Teresa on the phone in the kitchen after Philip had gone to bed. Her voice was warm, pleased. He's written it down. It's going to Philip directly. We won't even need the trust challenge after the guardianship goes through. A pause. Then, quieter. He has no idea. I stood in the hallway in the dark. I thought about Carol. About how she would have found a way to be sad about this. I have always been less good at that than she was. I went back to bed and set my alarm for 5. I packed on the morning of December 22nd. 2 bags, clothes, medications, the photographs of Carol I kept on my dresser, my notebooks. Philip and Teresa were asleep. The house was cold and dark. I moved through it the way you move through a place you know is no longer yours, which is to say carefully, and without looking at things too long. I put a manila envelope in the second drawer of my home office. On the outside, I wrote Philip's name. Inside, a copy of the deed transfer to the trust, a letter from Helen's office, a copy of Dr. Osei's evaluation, a short note in my own handwriting. I heard you on November 29th. I've heard more since. Everything I've built in this house is protected, and everything you planned has already failed. I hope whatever you needed this badly was worth what it cost you. Dad. I loaded the car at 5:45. It was still dark. My neighbor across the street had his porch light on. I'd lived on that street for 27 years. I backed out of the driveway, and I did not look in the mirror. The Marriott near Easton was cheerful with Christmas decorations. The woman at the front desk seemed mildly puzzled by a man checking in alone at 6 in the morning with 2 bags and no reservation. I said I had family plans that had changed. She said she was sorry to hear that. I said I wasn't. Not entirely. I paid for 4 nights in cash and went upstairs and sat by the window watching Columbus wake up and waited for my phone to ring. It rang at 11:17 a.m. Philip. I let it go 3 times. On the 4th, I answered. Dad. His voice was strange. Stripped of something. Where are you? Somewhere else, I said. The Hendersons are coming for dinner tonight. You promised. Check the drawer in my office. Second one down. There's an envelope with your name. Silence. What envelope? You'll find it. Read everything in it, then you'll understand where we are. I heard him moving through the house. Footsteps on the stairs. The particular creak of the hallway. I knew that house in the dark. I'd lived in it for 27 years. I waited. The sound of the drawer. Paper. Silence. Then Dad. His voice different now. Flat. This isn't what you think. I think you and your wife were planning to have me declared incompetent using a fraudulent medical assessment so you could execute a power of attorney and liquidate my retirement accounts. I think you've been manufacturing evidence of cognitive decline for approximately 6 months. I think you believed I wouldn't figure it out. I paused. Was I wrong about any of that? He didn't answer. In the background, I heard Teresa's voice, sharp and urgent. Then the phone was in her hands. Arthur. Her voice was controlled, precise, the voice she used in professional settings. I don't know what Helen Marsh has told you, but you've made decisions without fully understanding what we were trying to do. We were trying to protect you. We were trying to protect you. From what, Teresa? From yourself. From you've been struggling since Carol. Anyone can see. Dr. Patricia Osei would disagree. So would the Ohio Attorney General's office, which received a formal complaint on December 19th. So would the Fifth Third branch manager who helped me restructure my accounts on December 3rd. I kept my voice even. So would the trust documents, which have been on file with the county recorder since December 8th. The house isn't mine anymore. It belongs to a trust. A POA can't touch it. Silence. Then, you can't just. I already did. The accounts are gone, Teresa. There's nothing to execute a POA against. It's a key to a car I don't own anymore. I let that sit. I'm recording this conversation, which is legal in Ohio under one-party consent. I'd recommend choosing your next words carefully. She hung up. I sat by the hotel window for a long time after that. The Columbus skyline wasn't dramatic. A reasonable Midwestern city going about its December. People with places to be. I ordered room service and ate at the desk and wrote 4 more pages in my notebook. Helen called it 2015. They'd retained an attorney. Emergency petition claiming the trust transfer was executed under duress, mental incapacity. They're claiming I was incompetent when I executed the trust, I said. Yes, it's a standard countermove. We have Dr. Osei's evaluation dated 6 days before the trust was executed. Yes, we do. Helen's voice was dry. Their attorney is going to have a difficult morning when he reviews the file. A pause. Arthur, the AG complaint is what worries them most. That's criminal territory. Good, I said. It should worry them. The petition was filed the next morning, December 23rd, Christmas Eve. Helen filed our response the same afternoon. Certified psychiatric evaluation. Independent witness statements from Helen and Dr. Osei. Full financial records showing a competent, methodical restructuring conducted over 2 weeks. The fraudulent Dr. Harmon assessment, which Helen had obtained through discovery, contained clinical language copied nearly verbatim from online sources and bore a signature that, according to a handwriting analyst, was inconsistent with Dr. Harmon's known signature on other documents. The judge reviewing the emergency petition denied it within 48 hours. Her note in the ruling, petitioner has provided no credible evidence of cognitive incapacity. The documentation submitted by respondent demonstrates sustained, deliberate, and legally sound decision-making. Petition denied. I read that ruling 3 times. Philip called twice on Christmas Day. I didn't answer. Teresa called from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. She said I was being vindictive. She said I had misunderstood their intentions. She said the family deserved better than this. I thought about the word family, about what it means when one member of it is sitting in a hotel room on Christmas morning alone, eating continental breakfast, because the people he sheltered in his house for 14 months were planning to have him institutionalized. I didn't call back. Helen filed the civil complaint in January. Fraud, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. 2 years of de facto rent at fair market value. A 2-bedroom in Westerville goes for about $1,900 a month. 26 months came to $49,400. The emotional distress damages request was $65,000. Total $114,400. Their attorney tried to settle 3 times. First for $15,000, then for $28,000, then for $40,000 and a request that I drop the AG complaint, which I could not legally do even if I'd wanted to, since the AG's investigation was now independent of my civil case. I rejected all 3. The hearing was in March. Judge Renata Fowler presided. She was efficient and patient, and she read the entire file before she said a word. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "you've documented this with considerable thoroughness." I said I'd had practice. She reviewed the fraudulent assessment. She reviewed the manufactured evidence of cognitive decline I'd compiled in my 6 pages of notes. She reviewed the financial restructuring timeline and Dr. Osie's certification. She looked at Philip and Teresa's attorney. "Counsel, your clients developed and executed a coordinated scheme to manufacture evidence of incapacity against a competent adult for the purpose of financial exploitation. This court does not take that lightly." Their attorney started to speak. "I'm not finished." She returned to the file. "Additionally, this court is referring the matter of the fraudulent cognitive assessment to the Ohio Medical Board and, in conjunction with the AG's office, to the county prosecutor for potential criminal charges related to document fraud." Teresa closed her eyes. Philip stared at the table. Judgment for plaintiff, $114,400 plus court costs. I didn't feel triumph. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was tired and correct, which is a different thing. They filed for bankruptcy 4 months later. Chapter 7. Their combined debt exceeded $280,000, of which my judgment was the largest single item. The trustees' liquidation recovered $6,200 for me at a $114,400.11 on the dollar, roughly. Helen called to ask if I wanted to object to the discharge. I said no. Let them drown in the arithmetic they'd built. The AG investigation concluded in the fall. Dr. Harmon surrendered his medical license in lieu of a hearing. Philip was not charged criminally. There was not enough evidence of his direct involvement in the document fraud, which Teresa appeared to have handled alone. Whether he knew, I cannot prove. Whether he understood what she was doing and said nothing, I believe I know the answer to, and it is the answer that ended the relationship permanently. Teresa was charged with 1 count of attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person and 1 count of document fraud. She accepted a plea: probation, community service, restitution payments of $200 a month for as long as the order stood, which given the bankruptcy was a largely symbolic exercise. I donated each payment, when it arrived, to the Carol Ann Whitfield Memorial Fund. I found a house in Granville in the spring, smaller than Westerville, 1 floor, which my knees appreciate, a porch that faces west, so you get the full sunset over the rolling Ohio hills that flatten out toward the east, but have some actual shape on this side. Carol would have loved it. I bought it with cash, and I have never given anyone a key. Philip wrote me a letter in June, handwritten, 3 pages. He said he hadn't known the full extent of Teresa's plan. He said he had been trying to protect me in his own way and had allowed himself to be managed by someone who had worse intentions than he did. He said he was sorry. He said he missed his mother, and he had handled his grief badly, and he'd let that become an excuse for things he should have refused. I read it twice. I put it in my filing cabinet under a tab that says, Philip, June. I haven't responded. I'm not certain I will. The letter might be true. I am also aware that I am a documented expert in the behavior of people who have been caught and are trying to limit their losses. Those 2 things can both be real at the same time. What I know is this. I am 63 years old. I spent my career following money to find the truth about people. I trusted my son with my grief, and he let someone use that trust as a blueprint. I am not angry about it in the way I expected to be. Anger's loud, and I have always worked better in the quiet. I built something new on ground they couldn't reach. That is enough. My granddaughter Lily still visits on weekends when her mother brings her to see her grandmother's sister in Newark. She doesn't know the details. She knows Grandpa has a new house with a porch, and that there are good cookies, and that we still watch old movies until she falls asleep on the couch. That part is the same. That part I will protect for as long as I'm capable of protecting anything. The house settled around me as the sun went down behind the hills. I locked the door, set the alarm, sat down in the chair I'd bought for this specific porch. No one else's furniture. No one else's schedule. No one else's schedule. No one else's version of who I was or wasn't. I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote the date at the top. Old habits. I've been thinking about what it actually takes to survive something like this. Not the legal part. Helen handled most of that, and Dr. Osei's report did the rest. I mean the part that happens before you pick up the phone, the part where you're sitting at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee going cold, and you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be in the next 13 days. What I keep coming back to is this. The plan Philip and Teresa built only worked if I was who they believed I was. A grieving old man. Distracted. Soft. Easily managed. They'd been constructing that version of me for months, feeding it details, letting it grow, and, in a way, I had helped them, because grief does make you softer for a while. It made me say yes to things I wouldn't have said yes to otherwise. It made me want to believe the people in my house meant well. What they didn't account for was that I had spent 31 years building the opposite of that softness, not coldness. I want to be clear about the difference. Coldness is when you stop caring what's true. What I had was precision, the habit of following a thing all the way down to its foundation before I trusted it. Carol used to say I treated every family dinner like a forensic investigation. She meant it as a gentle joke. As it turned out, she was describing something that saved me. There's a version of the story where I never hear them on November 29th, where I come home at the normal time, eat dinner, watch the news, and sign whatever document lands in front of me 6 weeks later because I trusted my son and didn't think to question it. That version exists. It nearly happened. What separated me from it wasn't luck. It was the habit, built over decades, of paying attention to what doesn't add up. I think about young people sometimes, people just starting out, and I want to tell them something that took me most of my working life to fully understand. The sharpness of your mind is not just a professional tool. It is protection, the ability to think clearly under pressure, to document what you observe, to understand the legal and financial structures that govern your own life. These things are not optional for people who want to stay free. Teresa was counting on the fact that most people don't read their own account statements, that most people don't know what a durable power of attorney actually authorizes. She was right about most people. She was wrong about me. But intelligence without integrity is just a better set of tools for doing harm. What I keep returning to, in the quiet of the Granville house, is that I could have responded to this differently. I could have leaked what I knew, caused a scene, used what I'd built as a weapon rather than a shield. I chose not to, and I think that choice mattered, not for their sake, but for mine. The goal was never to destroy them. The goal was to protect what Carol and I had spent a lifetime building, and to make certain that the truth was on the record. Everything after that was consequence, not intention. And the last thing, the thing I'd tell anyone who finds themselves in a version of this situation, where someone they loved has turned out to be something different than they believed, is that endurance is not the same as stubbornness. It's not refusing to feel the loss. I felt it. I still feel it. Philip is my son, and I sat in a hotel room on Christmas morning alone, and that is not a small thing. Endurance is feeling all of that, and still getting up at 5, still making the calls, still doing the work. Because the alternative is letting someone else write the ending of your life. I wasn't willing to let that happen. I'm still not.